Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Daniel Goot, and joining me here today is my colleague, Doug Garrison.
Good afternoon. We're very excited that you've chosen to join us for the next hour as we begin our three-part series called Exiting ExxonMobil.
But before we dive in, we'd like to mention a couple of housekeeping items. The first of which, if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer your questions at the end of the webinar. The second thing, if you could click on View Options, which should be at the top of your screen, and then click Exit Full Screen. This will ensure that you see our slides as well as our faces during the presentation. Lastly, following the webinar, we will email you a recording of the webinar as well as a PDF of the slides, so you don't have to write down anything that you see on the screen. Now, we want to start by briefly explaining why we decided to do this webinar series. For those that don't yet know anything about Investec, we are a boutique wealth management firm located in Houston, Texas, that was founded in 1984. For over 35 years, we have been helping our clients transition into retirement and now manage over 600 million of retiree savings. And we've worked with ExxonMobil retirees for over 25 years and have the good fortune to now work with more than 45 Exxon clients. We've built a little niche within ExxonMobil and currently work with those that have at least $1 million in savings. Now, what makes us uniquely positioned to speak with each of you today is what we like to call our secret weapon. And that secret weapon is with me here today. Doug Garrison is one of you. He worked at ExxonMobil for over 30 years in human resources, the last 10 of which were in benefits design. Doug was on the team that helped to integrate Exxon and Mobil's benefit packages, and he was also instrumental in helping create programs like the Financial Fitness Program and the Culture of Health. Doug retired from Exxon in 2008, and after a few months of being at home, his lovely wife Janine turned to him and said, "Husband, I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch." So Doug decided to go back to school and enrolled in the financial planning program at St. Thomas University. He earned his certified financial planner designation, and our paths crossed at just the right time. Doug has now been an advisor with Investec for almost 10 years. And as you'll learn today, Doug's knowledge of Exxon's benefits is unparalleled in the financial advisor industry. So let's jump in and get going. As you know, you have signed up for a three-part series, which we hope will arm you with the knowledge and confidence to begin your transition into retirement. Today, we plan on covering step 1, which is your readiness for retirement and the factors that might impact the timing of your decision. Next week, in step 2, we're going to address a couple of very big consequential decisions. You don't want to miss step 2, as these important decisions may be irreversible. We're going to talk about your pension and whether to take a lump sum or take the annuity. We're going to talk about your ExxonMobil savings plan and what options you have with it. And lastly, we're going to talk about any potential ExxonMobil stock that you may have in your savings plan and some tax considerations and strategies that you definitely want to learn about before you make any big changes. Finally, in 2 weeks, in step 3, we're going to talk about how best to generate a steady, growing stream of income in retirement and how to grow and preserve your wealth in the next chapter of your life after Exxon. Now, throughout this webinar series, we're going to be providing our understanding of ExxonMobil's benefit rules and procedures. But Doug is no longer an ExxonMobil employee, and we are not affiliated with Exxon in any way. So if you find any discrepancies between what we say today and over the next 2 weeks, and anything that you learn from the Benefits Service Center, please do let us know. So I'd like to now turn it over to Doug. He's going to start by recapping a story that he recently told me that I thought would be a good way to visualize this next chapter in your lives.
Have you ever started a journey without knowing exactly where you were going? Well, my first journey like that started the summer after I graduated from college. I boarded a big jet plane at JFK Airport in New York City, and along with 40 other Peace Corps volunteers, took an overnight flight to Brazil. I didn't know the language, didn't really have a clue about the culture, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to be doing working with farmer-owned cooperatives in the Amazon. Well, fast forward past 3 months of training, and I found myself with a couple of young Brazilian agronomists in a small boat with an outboard motor traveling down a tributary of the Amazon River. As the sun set and the coolness of the night set in, we arrived at a small village of about 4,000 people, which was to be my home, my new home for the next year. I was the only American in town. I was to work in a small farmer-owned cooperative, and I slept in a hammock surrounded by a mosquito net. Well, I survived that year. I moved on to a different job in a larger city and ended up spending 2 more years working with the state of Amazonas Rural Extension Service. That experience changed my life forever. So why would I tell you that story? Well, many of you are contemplating a journey of your own, leaving employment with ExxonMobil and beginning retirement. Just as I wasn't altogether clear about that early journey nearly 50 years ago, you may be trying to catch your bearings as you consider retiring, actually making the decision, and then completing all the paperwork required to retire. And all of that is just about the equivalent of just getting onto that jet at JFK. Just as I did, you've got questions about what lies ahead. Our wish for you today is that your retirement journey proves as enjoyable and perhaps as life-changing as the one I embarked on so many years ago. Now, I'm in this second career by choice. I've seen too many cases over the years where people haven't received good advice about retirement and personal finance, and they and their loved ones have suffered as a consequence. People don't understand NUA, or net unrealized appreciation. Some people make a retirement decision based simply on the lump sum interest rate. People don't take advantage of all the options that are available to them, or they get bad advice. I think I'm making a difference in people's lives by equipping them with knowledge and helping them with their personal finances. And I hope this series equips you with the knowledge that will benefit you and your family.
That's great, Doug. Thank you. So we'd like to take 2 quick polls to gather your thoughts on 2 very important questions at this stage in the webinar. So if we can start the first poll, if you could please click the answer that you think best represents how you feel at this time. Do you feel that you are ready emotionally to retire? And we'll give you a little bit of time to answer the question. Okay, looks like most of the votes are in. So we'll close the poll and show you the results. And there you have it. Almost 70% of you believe that you're emotionally ready to retire. That's great. But now we're going to ask a second question, which may be the more important of the 2. Poll question number 2. Do you feel that your spouse is ready emotionally for you to retire? Okay, looks like most of the votes in. We'll close the poll and show the results. And there you have it. It's a little more even split there. 57% say yes, but certainly less than felt that they themselves were ready emotionally. Okay, so Doug, tell us, what was the first question that you felt you had to answer as you were preparing for your retirement after 30 plus years at ExxonMobil?
Well, Daniel, for me, it started with a fairly simple question of, was I ready for retirement? You know, that's a simple question, but we think it's an important one. But not everybody thinks it is. One of the things that used to drive me crazy when I was back at Exxon doing benefits work was hearing of financial advisors who would encourage or even scare employees to retire quickly, as soon as possible. Obviously, they wanted to get clients and start earning fees. Here at Investec, we think it's worth asking the question and waiting for the individual to be ready to retire. So it's a simple question. Am I ready to retire? But sort of like my wife's lasagna, there are many layers to answering that question, which we'll explore during our time together. Actually, as I think about it, considering our audience, a better analogy might be layers or strata of sedimentary rock. Anyway, you may have the luxury of answering that question for yourself, or the question may have been answered for you. Either way, I think it's a question worth considering. Are you ready for retirement? But first, let's think a little bit about what we mean by retirement. If you're covered by the Exxon US benefit program and you leave employment with at least 55 years of age and with 15 years of service, they call that retirement. At Investec, we define retirement a little bit differently. We say it's when you have the freedom to choose what you're going to do. Leaving the company doesn't necessarily mean you no longer work for money. You may plan a second career like I did. You may plan on doing volunteer work, or you may have travel or hobby plans. But the point is you now have choices as to what's next. So a first element in answering that question is whether you have plans for the future. If you don't have clarity, you may want to continue working for a while. But if you're anxious to get going on whatever lies ahead, you may be ready to leave ExxonMobil. The point is, we think it's important to have some notion of what you're planning to do in this next chapter.
Yeah, you know, Doug, it's interesting. When you say that, it reminds me of why I have the passion for being a financial advisor and being in this industry. And it's because of the personal level that we get to know of our clients. And I can remember it as if it was yesterday. We had a client come to us who was retiring from ExxonMobil within the next few months. And when we asked her what she was planning to do in retirement, she pulled out a laundry list of things that she wanted to do from day one. And while that may not be the most common answer, some people have a blank list, as is shown here on the screen. But wherever you fall in between there really is no right or wrong way to do this. As they say, there's different strokes for different folks. So what other things have you learned, Doug, from clients that are on the verge of retirement and really need help making that final decision?
Well, Daniel, a second consideration is from a personal or an emotional perspective. How do you feel about leaving the world and the work that's absorbed your life for so many years? Are you ready and okay with passing the baton to someone else or having your duties distributed to those who are left? Or are there things that you still want to accomplish? You've devoted a lot of time to your job. Are you really ready to give it up? And how did you answer that second poll question? How does your spouse feel about the prospect of what could potentially be much more together time? Are you both okay with seeing much more of each other every day? Is your partner excited about the possibilities that retirement offers you both, or not so much? Finally, are you ready to give up the perks, the status, the responsibilities, the routine that work provides? Some have phrased it as going from who's who to who's that. Are you ready to move on to establish a new identity? Now, these are clearly personal aspects of contemplating retirement, of answering the question of, am I ready for retirement? but we think they're important considerations.
So I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions for us during the webinar, to please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and post your question there. And when we get done with the webinar, we will answer them all live today. So now that we have a better understanding of some of the emotional and personal considerations of retiring, what about the financial ones? After all, we are financial advisors, not psychologists, though it does often feel the other way around sometimes.
Well, in addition to having plans and being okay with leaving the corporate scene, a third consideration we think you should think about as you approach retirement is the financial trade-off between continuing to work and going off the payroll. As you debate the timing of your retirement, it's important to keep in mind the financial differences between working and a steady paycheck and being retired and off the payroll. This slide contrasts differences between the two, and these factors may come into play as you hone in on a specific time to retire. We want you to consider these factors along with others as you think through your readiness to retire.
So now that we've started the transition in this webinar to the financial considerations of retirement, we'd like to do another poll, this time to find out what percentage of you feel you are financially ready to retire. So if you could take a minute, please, and answer the question here. We'll give it just a few more seconds here. Okay, looks like most people have responded, so we can close the poll and show the results. And it's a pretty even split with the edge going to no. So lots of questions out there as to whether or not y'all are financially ready to retire. Okay. So Doug, one of the items you mentioned in that last slide, on the left side in the working years column, was your nest egg. We often get asked the question of how much do I need to be able to retire? And one of the reasons why we love working with ExxonMobil retirees is because of the incredible benefits programs that you help to nurture while you're in benefits design. Now, so many of our Exxon clients have saved into the savings plan, and as they approach retirement, that benefit, together with their pension, really affords them a very comfortable lifestyle in retirement. Now, another item that you had on your list, this time on the right-hand side for retirees, was turning that nest egg into income. And I think most people on this call today are now thinking about that question. Can you give us some pointers on the kind of general rules of thumb of what we might expect our nest egg to generate in terms of annual income?
I'll try, Daniel. Research done several years ago generated a rule of thumb about how much you can take out each year from a balanced portfolio and still not run out of money. Based on extensive simulations, the researcher determined that you can initially take out about 4% per year from a balanced, that is to say 50% stocks, 50% bonds, a balanced portfolio, and not run out of money over a 30-year time horizon. Each year you would adjust the withdrawal by inflation, and you'd end up not running out of money. And that became known as the 4% rule. So to illustrate, if you need, let's say, $100,000 each year, in addition to Social Security and other income, the 4% rule would say you would need a portfolio of $2.5 million. Or if you have a portfolio of $1 million, you could take 40,000 or 4% out that first year and increase it by inflation each year thereafter. But that's a rule of thumb, not a guarantee. That research was done when interest rates on bonds were higher than they are today. That time horizon was 30 years. Some of us expect retirement to last 35 or 40 years. Today, we think the 4% rule probably ought to be more like a 3.5% rule. And the rule is also for steady spending. In reality, there are years where you'll spend more and years you'll want to spend less. If you really want to get a fix on a sustainable rate of spending of your nest egg, a financial plan that factors in a number of issues is the way to go.
Yeah, so the word financial plan gets thrown around a lot. We'd like to briefly describe what we believe to be the most important components of a comprehensive plan. Now, as you can see on this slide, it's not just about turning that nest egg into income, or as it's described here, cash flow. There are so many other aspects of your financial life that go into a comprehensive plan. And all of these aspects are so interrelated and intertwined that you really need to be sure that you have a good grasp on all of them. So, Doug, tell us a little bit about your experience of planning with clients. After all, we are a financial planning firm.
Well, I'll start by saying that the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. But we've found that although our plans don't always go as expected, the value of having a plan and updating it periodically over one's retirement far outweighs going into a retirement blind. Let me tell you about my wife, Janine, from about 10 years ago. She's been fairly skeptical about having money during retirement. As long as we had a steady paycheck, things were fine. But she grew up poor and tended to be mistrustful of investments. She, quite frankly, wasn't sure that our nest egg would last us throughout retirement. I was worried about having someone knowledgeable and trustworthy who could help if I were out of the picture. So we came to Investec and had a plan done for us. And as we reviewed the results, Janine turned to me and said, "Doug, for 28 years, you've been telling me we'll be all right. Only now do I believe that we'll not be eating Alpo dog food when we're 85. So one of the benefits of a plan is to provide a baseline assurance that you'll be okay. But clearly the road from here until your final days will have a lot of surprises. In the financial context, there is on average a bear market where stocks go down by more than 20% once every 5 years. If your retirement lasts 30 years, you can probably expect 5 to 6 of those scary bear markets to occur. Inflation, we think, will undoubtedly be higher in the future. Today, we're at all-time lows. Some of us remember those days in the 70s with double-digit interest rates and high inflation. Congress is likely to change tax rates and then change again and again. The point is, having just one plan is not enough. A plan needs to be periodically updated as you move through life, and adjustments need to be made accordingly.
That's great. So I'd like to build off of that and show a few slides that can help you visualize what a plan looks like and the types of questions that it can help answer. So most importantly, the biggest question on most retirees' mind, can I fund all my goals without running out of money? Now, a good plan will use sophisticated modeling to help you answer that question, because there isn't just one answer. In this case, as you can see, this client had an 88% probability of success of not running out of money before they ran out of breath. Now, this would be an example of someone that we believe could enter retirement with a high level of confidence that they were ready financially. Now, you may say, well, what about the 12% of the time where they do run out of money? I see a little bit of red on that screen. And we'd answer that by saying that 12% of the time is where you'll need to make course corrections through your retirement to ensure that you're on track to not run out of money. And as Doug mentioned, a plan is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing process. So now let's talk about some other common questions that retirees have on their minds that may keep them up at night. So a good plan can help answer some questions of what are you afraid of? For instance, what happens to my probability of success if we suffer another bear market like we did in the Great Recession of 2008? Or what happens if Social Security benefits get cut by, say, 25% or 50% or even more? What effect does that have on my probability of success? Good software can help you run different scenarios to give you those answers and the confidence that you are making the right decision to retire at this time. And the last example I'll show is a question that we get all the time. When should I take my Social Security? So as you can see here, a plan like this evaluates the various options that you have and easily communicates the differences between those options and what are the break-even points. This one exercise we have found can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars and is a very important discussion to have. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, Doug, was having a plan, right? So I'd like to turn to the audience, final time, to ask our final poll question of the evening. And the question here is, do you have a retirement income plan? We'll give just a little bit longer for people to answer. This one has 4 different choices. It's not just a yes or no. Okay, looks like the votes have stopped coming in, so let's close the poll and show the results. And it looks like we have a tie between the second and the third answer. Second one being I do, however, I'm not sure whether or not I'm on track. And the third one, which says I don't, but I will eventually get around to it. The fourth one, what is a retirement income plan? Well, that's a few of the slides that we just went over in the last few pages, which shows you how much you can afford to spend during your retirement based on the assets that you've saved. Now, a study by Fidelity found that having a written retirement plan is not a priority for most Americans, and that includes baby boomers. In fact, the study says that 3 out of 4 boomers, 75%, do not have a written financial plan. So, based on these numbers, it looks like you guys are doing a little bit better than that. Now, Doug, let's transition now to a question of timing. A lot of people look at the lump sum interest rate as the Rosetta Stone as to when they should retire. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Daniel, in my experience, there are many ExxonMobil employees who don't necessarily think through their readiness to retire, but look to the ExxonMobil pension plan lump sum interest rate as the signal on whether it's time to go. During my years in Exxon, I saw numerous examples of folks waiting until the rate moves up, and then they scramble to get out of the door before they lose money on the lump sum. And I think we may see that again in the next quarter or two, because fourth quarter 20 and perhaps first quarter 21 rates may be the lowest lump sum interest rates for quite a while. And that's most advantageous for lump sums. While choosing the quarter with a favorable interest rate is important, we think there are some other factors that you should consider if you have the opportunity to decide for yourself when's the right time to exit ExxonMobil. But let's start by discussing the lump sum issue. If you plan on taking all or a portion of your pension benefit as a lump sum, with one exception, the applicable rate is the one that's in effect on your benefit commencement date, or BCD. BCD is defined as the date you want your lump sum paid or your annuity to start. That's the benefit commencement date. And it's always on the first of a month. The lump sum interest rates are determined 4 times a year and announced approximately 2.5 months ahead of the quarter for which they're applicable. So to get the interest rate for a particular quarter, your BCD needs to fall within that quarter. For example, the rate for the first quarter of 2021 will apply for BCDs of January 1st, February 1st, and March 1st of 2021. Now, there is one exception for those employees who were grandfathered under a prior rate, a prior interest rate process. And this rule may not apply to many in the audience, but for those that it does, we wanted to make sure to cover it. Employees who were at least 50 years of age and had 10 years of service by the end of 2007 were grandfathered under a prior method of calculating the lump sum pension benefit. If they retire in December, even though their BCD is January 1st, they can have their lump sum benefit calculated on the basis of fourth quarter interest rates. Don't worry about this if it's not applicable to you.
Doug, you mentioned something that reminded me of a client situation. I recall we had a client recently who questioned why their lump sum payment was actually lower if they decided to work an extra quarter. Now, normally we assume the longer we work, the bigger the lump sum payment. But that's not always the case, as we saw with this client. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, Daniel, you would think that it's better to work a few more months, possibly into the following quarter. But let's remember that the pension formula looks at your pensionable service, years, months, and even days, takes the average of your highest consecutive 36 months of pay, called the final average pay. Now, if your current salary is higher than your salary, say, 3 years ago, you'll marginally increase your final average pay each month that you continue to work. You'll be trading a month's pay from 3 years ago for a higher rate of pay today. In most cases, the monthly pension benefit will be somewhat higher with more service and a higher final average pay. However, when that monthly annuity is converted into a lump sum, it's possible that there's not much difference between the lump sum now versus 3 months from now. Even if the interest rate stays the same, the calculation of the lump sum recognizes that you're marginally older with a slightly lower life expectancy, so the lump sum factor will be somewhat lower. Also, if you're under 62, the pre-Social Security pension will be paid for slightly fewer months. Both of these factors may offset to some extent the additional service and higher final average pay. You'll want to get a pension estimate for both anticipated retirement dates and compare.
So Doug, I know one of the many things that you've taught us about ExxonMobil benefits is that there are some IRS limits on pension and savings plan benefits that can be paid from a tax qualified plan. Now, how might that impact a person's decision on when to retire?
Well, it probably only impacts a few higher paid people. Most participants only receive tax qualified retirement plan benefits when they retire from the pension plan and the savings plan. And those benefits can be rolled over at retirement into an IRA without incurring taxes. But you're right, Daniel, the IRS does impose limits on benefits from the pension plan and how much contributions can go into the savings plan. Now, ExxonMobil provides employees who are affected by those limits with supplemental benefits. Those are called the supplemental pension plan and the supplemental savings plan. And if you received incentive program awards, you may be eligible for another taxable non-qualified benefit called the additional payment plan. Now, all these supplemental benefits are paid in a lump sum at the time of your retirement and are not, you can't transfer those into an IRA. Those are taxable benefits. So it may be beneficial from a tax perspective to retire early in the following year when your total taxable compensation for the year may be less than the prior year's compensation.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know another one of the confusing aspects of retiring from ExxonMobil are the various dates and forms that people have to fill out. So can you help summarize as best as you can these two concepts?
Well, I'll certainly try. The lump sum interest rates are calculated 4 times a year, as I mentioned, and are announced about 2.5 months ahead of the quarter for which they're applicable. That's shown across the top of the chart. But if you know which quarter's interest rate you want and the month that you want as your benefits commencement date, then you'll need to request an intent to retire package 90 to 120 days in advance. That's the second row in the chart. You'll get a bunch of forms in that package and you'll need to complete them and submit them to the Benefits Service Center at least 35 days before your BCD. Completion of the forms in that package documents how you want your pension benefit paid, among other issues. You'll also need to get your supervisor or manager to submit a smart form within 30 to 60 days of your BCD to document that management's aware that you're really retiring and moving off the payroll. That's the third row in the chart. Now, these are broad guidelines that are shown on the Benefits Service Center website. Recognize that if you fail to submit your paperwork within these guidelines, you can still retire. You're just likely not to get the pension payment on time. When you're in the midst of the process, you'll have a retirement counselor available to help you. I might add that we work very closely with our ExxonMobil clients to help them with their questions and the decisions that they need to make. Actually, we've had a few clients the past month or two who have sought out our help in completing their intent to retire forms, making sure they filled it out correctly. And we're happy to help. ExxonMobil, I would say, has not spared many trees in processing retirements. There are a lot of pages in the package, and it can be daunting to receive it.
Excellent. Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned in the opening, Doug Garrison is a treasure trove full of Exxon benefit information. And there is so much more where that came from. So I'd like to begin the final part of our webinar, we're in the final stretch here, by summarizing what we've discussed today. Number one, we talked about several factors that go into evaluating your readiness to retire. Number two, we talked about how a retirement or a financial plan can help answer the many questions that you may have as you're approaching retirement. And number three, we talked about how to determine the optimal timing for when to retire. Now, before we get to the Q&A, wanted to remind everyone again about step 2 in our 3-part series, which will be next Thursday, October 1st, again at 5 o'clock Central. You are already registered for steps 2 and 3, so there's nothing you need to do on your end. You will get reminder emails with the link the day before the webinar. Now, as we mentioned earlier, step 2 next week, we're going to address some big consequential decisions that may be irreversible regarding your pension and savings plan, so you don't want to miss it. Now, following today's webinar, you will receive an email with the following 4 items. As I mentioned earlier, there'll be a link to the recording in case you missed anything. Number 2, there'll be a PDF of the slides. Number 3, there'll be a survey for you to complete, letting us know how we did today. And the 4th thing is a link to schedule a free video call with Doug and myself to discuss your personal situation. Now, in addition, the same calendar link is on the homepage of our website, which you can see here. Our website is www.investecwealth.com. And from the homepage, you can click on one of the Let's Talk buttons and find a convenient time that suits your schedule. And while you're on our website, be sure to check out the ExxonMobil section, which is under the Who We Help button. Doug has written many blogs about ExxonMobil benefits, which we believe you'll find very useful. And if you do decide to schedule a free call with us, we can discuss not only your ExxonMobil benefits, but as well the multitude of wealth management services that we offer our clients, which you can see here. Okay, so now we're going to turn to the Q&A section. Give me a minute to read the questions and see if we can answer them. So the first question is, how often do you update your clients' plans? And I'll address that one. So as Doug mentioned, planning is a process. It's not a one-time thing. And we do believe that it's very important to update your plan as you move through retirement. And what we like to do is update it every 2 to 3 years, unless there's a major financial decision that you're looking to make. Now, it's been very interesting working with retirees, because what we find often is people get new ideas all the time, whether it's a vacation home or a very expensive boat. or a big RV. There's lots of big financial decisions that you have to make in retirement, and the planning process can help you make sure that you're feeling most confident in that decision. Next question is, should I pay off my mortgage before I retire or not? And I'll take that one as well. You know, in today's environment, with interest rates as low as they are, we believe that generally speaking, having a mortgage in retirement is not a bad thing. And the simple math behind that statement is as follows. If you can borrow from a bank at say 2.5 or 3%, that's your interest rate for your mortgage. The simple question you have to ask is, can I invest my savings and earn more than 2.5 to 3% over the next 15 or 30 years? And we believe that that is a very achievable goal. And if that is the answer, if you are able to get more return from your investments than what you're paying the bank in interest, then we do believe from a financial perspective that it does make sense to still have a mortgage, even though you're retired and don't have your, quote, steady income from Exxon. Doug, I'll let you handle this next question, which is, aren't financial plans complex? What if I don't know exactly what I want to do in retirement? Can you still create a plan for me?
Well, the short answer to that is yes, we can. Slightly longer explanations, we can create a couple of different scenarios. One perhaps assuming that you do a lot of traveling, another one perhaps assuming that you go back and have a second career, and we can compare the two. And as we've mentioned repeatedly, these plans are updated periodically. So you may start out with one set of goals and objectives, and then over a couple of years, you may decide on something else. So it's a question of sort of a baseline assumption as to what we want to assume as kind of the baseline. And then we can modify it, create different alternatives, different scenarios, and reevaluate it periodically. Does that pretty much answer the question, Daniel?
I think so, yeah. So the next one is also on kind of the retirement planning process. And the question is, can we begin the retirement planning process if my spouse is still working for a number of years after I retire? I'll handle that one. And the answer is yes, we can. So the planning software that we use can model whether both of you are retired or just one of you are retired. And there's lots of nuances that we can put in the software to show you the results of what that looks like. So you don't both need to be retired in order to put together a retirement plan. Okay, I don't see any more questions yet.
There is a final question that I see, Daniel.
Okay.
One of our viewers said, in respect of the wealth management services, that's a lot of services. You guys do all of that? Well, my answer to that is there's more than just Daniel and me at Investec. We've got a staff who help with all these different services that we do. But yes, these are all aspects of our clients' financial lives that will help address if they're relevant to that individual client. Daniel, you want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, I think I'll follow on that and just talk about the team for a minute, because you mentioned that it is more than just the two of us, and yes, it is. There are 6 advisors at Investec. You've met now 2 of us. All 6 are certified financial planners. We have a team of 11 in total, and we have a great team of people that really get to know all of our clients at a very personal level. So I mentioned early on that we're a boutique firm. And what that means is we're not a big Wall Street, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley type firm that has thousands of clients. Although we've grown very nicely over the years, we have less than a couple hundred clients. And because of that, and because of the number of advisors that we have, we can really get to know all of our clients on a very personal level and help them with a multitude of services that you see here on the screen. Okay, I see another question here, which is, do your investment management fees include financial planning, or is that an extra charge? So good question, and we didn't really even talk about our fees. The way that we charge for our services is based on fees under the assets under management. So we start at 1% a year for the first $750,000, and that's paid quarterly. And the fees percentage-wise then go lower the larger the assets under management. So the next 750,000 are charged at 0.75%, and the next million, it slides down to 0.5%, and so on and so forth from that point on. So we charge based on the assets under our management, starting at 1%, but going down from there. And our financial planning services. So if you look at the blue column, right, the investment management, that's kind of how we charge our fees, is based on the investments. But for our clients that have at least $1 million under management with us, we do provide the other financial planning services that are on this page at no extra cost. So those planning services are included. You're not going to get charged hourly or retainer. It's included in the investment management fees. And I can tell you, because we benchmark ourselves to other firms around the country every year. And when we look at the results of those benchmarking studies that are done on thousands of different firms like us, our fees are in the lower half, if not the lower quartile, compared to our competitors. So we know that our fees are very competitive, and we know that our services are very broad, but still very detailed. We get into good detail on each of the boxes that you see here on the screen. Doug, do you see any more questions?
No, I don't, Daniel. I think it's about time to wrap it up unless anybody has an additional question. I would just say thank you all for participating, and we look forward to seeing you or having you with us. I guess we don't see you. Having you with us next Thursday. Hope
Yes.
It's been worthwhile.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating today. We hope you found it helpful, and we look forward to having you again next Thursday.